You mentioned community building. I'm curious, like over the course of the project's life, which spans over 20 years, um, do you remember what things you did to support community building? Because I assume that either at the beginning or over time there was a need, like regardless of how many people and where they are from in the community to do activities that really gives it a community feel that helps people to work easier and closer to each other, better with each other, and also try to grow the community and yeah, foster the community that you had.
Yeah. So we definitely have gone through pretty big differences and changes in terms of how much effort we put into community building and community structure. In the early years, we did very little, and I think there are two reasons for that. One is, as we've talked about, we had a ton of work to do and to prove our case, and so it just like we couldn't even imagine, I think, putting resources into it. But the other thing is we sort of had a built-in community. So I've talked about the DARPA HPCS program that is the program that spawned this language, this project. I haven't talked much about in those early milestone reviews where we would show up and talk about what we were doing. When people hear DARPA, they might just think sort of defense agencies, DoD, but it was a really wide tent. So the Department of Energy was there, NOAA was there, EPA was there. So sort of anybody in the government who used computing was encouraged to come to these and give their 2 cents. And so we sort of had this built-in community through those milestone reviews and the program structure itself, where we sort of, we knew these were the people that were funding us that we were trying to make successful and more productive. And we knew we had their attention. And so there wasn't really a lot of drive or need for community building, if you will. And I think it was as the HPCS program was winding down that we started thinking about like, okay, well, what's next? And how do we grow and how do we find new users? And so it was kind of during those years that we did things like design a logo, for example, happened in 2011. We put out a call to the community and to Cray employees saying like, hey, whenever people ask us for a logo, we just give them chapel in Times Roman font or something like that, right? We really need a logo. And we had like 100 entries come in and we voted on them and had the executives at Cray vote on them and had a clear winner. So that was kind of a baby step towards community. And from that, we developed our first swag because now we had a logo we could slap onto things, and we passed around USB sticks, and then in later years, microfiber cloths and bags. And my favorite was we did a series of fortune cookies where the fortunes were things like, we see productive parallel programming in your future, and it had the Chapel logo and stuff like that.
I love that.
So that was kind of, again, late 2010, 2011's kind of a couple other big steps we did in 2014, which was probably a year or two after the HPCS program wound down. We held our first, we started our first social media accounts. And wait, let me see if I get the timing right here. Yeah, it was around that time. Yeah, 2014. We held our first, our first dedicated community workshop or conference, depending on what you want to call it. A few years prior to that, we had started a happy hour at Supercomputing, which again is this large, massive convention that's kind of the center of the HPC world every year. It's happening this week, in fact. I'm sitting it out this year. And for a few years, we had this get-together at Supercomputing. We would just sort of invite people to show up at a bar and talk about Chapel. And I don't even think we offered to buy their drinks because we didn't really have a budget, and there are all sorts of ethical questions about that and stuff. So it was basically just like, come hang out with us and talk Chapel. And we called it Chug, the Chapel Users Group, which probably would raise HR concerns today. And it was sort of a playoff of CUG, which is the Cray Users Group, which is a well-established, very big workshop and annual conference that goes on to this day. So we did Chug for a few years, and we're like, okay, well, we should do an actual conference or workshop where people can present papers and things. And we're trying to come up with a name for it. And I'm terrible at naming things, but this is one of the things I was happiest with. We called it Chew, because I liked Chug and Chew as kind of complementary names. And it was spelled CHIUW, and it stood for the Chapel Implementers and Users Workshop. And so that ran for about 10 years. And a couple years ago, we rebranded it to ChapelCon because nobody ever knew what Chew actually meant, or most people didn't even get the joke anymore. So now it's called ChapelCon. And that continues to be, as far as community building and sort of synchronizing with the community, that continues to be one of our biggest events where we get people to submit talks and papers and to present them. We also do tutorials and interactive coding sessions and things. And ever since COVID, we've been doing it in a completely virtual setting to just completely reduce barriers to participation. It's a free event. And so, anybody who's curious about Chapel or productive parallel computing, we encourage to come check out ChapelCon each year. This year that happened about a month ago now, and we've just put up all of the talks and slides from that up online. So if people want to sort of revisit it virtually, that's a possibility as well.